Hello everyone, welcome back to Bees Creations. My name is Beatrice. In today's video, I will be sewing. Yes, you guys, today's video is part 3 of my beginner-friendly sewing videos. In part 1, I went over how to take body measurements, read and understand pattern envelope. In part 2, I went over the pattern layout, how to read and understand what's inside of your pattern. Part 3 today, I will be sewing this beautiful top that I'm wearing. I usually don't go into details on how I cut the pattern pieces and the fabric when I'm sewing, but today I try to show a little bit more while still having a short video. I hope you guys will find this video very helpful. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. In today's video, I will be making view C. First, I go here and circle all the numbers that I will be using to make view C. And here are all the pattern pieces that I'm gonna be using for view C. Here is where I check for my size. I'm only looking at the first layout because this is the one that's for my size. I'm going to open the fabric like so, with right side facing me. According to the layout, I will be placing all the pattern pieces on one single layer. I've already cut the pattern pieces. Pattern piece number 1, which is the front. Pattern piece number 2, the back. Pattern piece number 3, front left side. Pattern piece number 4, back left side. Pattern piece number 5, neckband. Pattern piece number 10, the sleeves. And pattern piece number 11, the cuff sleeves. Now this is how I pin the pattern pieces on the fabric, making sure the heel is parallel to the selvage. Next, I will cut the fabric like so. Mark all the notches. Also transfer all the big circles and small circles, the triangles, everything that's on the pattern piece for view C, I will transfer onto my fabric. And be sure to check for other views because the pattern piece will have other views on it as well. This one is for view D. I will not transfer these markings there that says view D. To mark the circle, I put a pin there and mark it on the wrong side of the fabric using a fabric marker. I've already cut all the pattern pieces and transferred all the notches on my fabric. Now let's start sewing. To reinforce, I'm running a straight stitch about 1 inch, back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. Clip at the large circle mark and be sure not to cut the stitches. I've already pinned front pattern piece number 1 and number 3 together at the center. Stitching 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. To double stitch, I'm doing a second stitch close to the first one on the outside, about 1/4 of an inch away from the first stitch. I've already pinned back pattern piece number 4 and number 2 together at center back. Now again, I'm doing a double stitch like I did for the front. Back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. I've already pressed the seam allowance to one side. Next, with right side together, I'm pinning front and back at the right shoulder and upper sleeve edges. I'm stitching 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. I'm stitching again about 1/4 inch away from the first stitch to make a double stitch. Now I'm stitching the left shoulder, ending the stitch at the small circle. I'm stitching it again to make a double stitch, 1/4 of an inch away from the first stitch. Then I trim the seam allowance close to the second stitch. I've also pressed the seam allowance of right shoulder towards the back. Next, I'm going to make a 5/8 of an inch narrow hem at the left shoulder opening edges between the small and large circle in the front and small circle and square in the back. And that's how that looks. Next, I've already pinned front and back together at the side and the lower sleeve edges. I'm stitching 5/8 of an inch seam allowance back stitch at the beginning. Back stitch at the end. Stitch again to make a double stitch. For the neckband, I've already pinned ends of the neckband together at the center back. Stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance back stitch at the beginning. Back stitch at the end. Next, I turn in the seam allowance and baste it close to the folded edge. With right side together, I've pinned the neckband to the top, matching the center seams. Stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. I'm going to trim the seam and press it towards the collar band. Then I'm going to slip stitch the remaining edges. Stitch it on the outside and very close to the finished edge. And that's how that looks. I've already pinned the sleeve edges together. Stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance Stitch it again to make a double stitch. Stitch the other side the same way. To gather the lower edge of the sleeves, I made 2 rows of basting stitches. Now I'm pulling on the top threads to form the gather. For the cuff, I've already pinned both ends of cuff together. I'm going to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. With one side together, I'm folding the cuff along the fold line, matching the center seams. I went ahead and I basted the cuff to the sleeve, matching the center seams. Stitching 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to stitch it again to make a double stitch. And that's how that looks. I've trimmed the seam close to the stitching and pressed it towards the sleeve. With right side together, pin the sleeves to the top. I'm going to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And stitch it again close to the first stitch. And that's how that looks. I did this part off camera. I did a narrow hem for the bottom and I'm all done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.